Thank you, Tyler. Okay, good morning. Sorry about that. All right. Just running around with little ones in the morning. How's everyone doing? It's so great to see all of you all today. Okay, so for some of you, this is your first office hours, and really it's just a time to talk and if you have questions about the program, if you have like general health questions, we can talk about those things too. Just a reminder though, I'm not a doctor. I think very mechanistically, and so I can kind of help you out with, from that side of things. But I definitely cannot, diagnose, prescribe, like all of that stuff. But we can definitely talk about things generally. So if anyone has questions, just let me know. I love talking about lifting. So if you want to talk about lifting, we can definitely talk about lifting. But yeah, if anyone has questions, you can raise your hand or just put it in the chat if you don't want to talk. Looks like,
Kathleen, I know you're hypermobile, or you've struggled with that in the past, and I do as well. I slip my first rib all the time,
yeah.
and I'm out of town, and I can tell it's like lifted, and I have a little bit of movement I can do for my PT. But do you, what do you recommend for like preventing that from happening? Just continuing to get stronger, or
Yeah, so hypermobility is a very interesting thing because it's almost like, well, it depends on the kind of hypermobility, but for a lot of people, the rib cage gets like very tight almost. And then because of that, we're more likely to slip ribs. And I used to slip, not my first ribs, but I used to slip my like lower left like two ribs all the time. Not the floating ribs, but like right above it. And it was incredibly painful. And the only like current thing that conventional medicine has is to remove the ribs. And it's like, no, I don't want to remove my ribs. That's crazy. Um, so for me, something that I found to be just so incredibly helpful is working on getting movement in the rib cage to, and there's something about if we can like free up the rib cage, that has always helped me globally. So with my shoulders, fingers, like I can like sublux my thumbs, I can sublux like my ulna. I thankfully haven't had like big issues. Well, I have like slipping knee issues with my knees, but they don't like sublux or anything like that. And thankfully my hips don't really cause issues. But there are some people where they're like laying down and their like femur just comes out. Um, but and then I've also had like big ankle sprain issues and stuff. So, anyways, like I was saying, if we can get some mobility in the rib cage, that seems to really help. And so, what does that look like? I love supported hanging. So you basically hang from the bar with your feet on the ground and just breathing 360 degrees into the rib cage to get some movement. A lot of um, a lot of hypermobile people are also, this is very much me, we're wider but we're narrow front to back. And so getting like a lot of sideline positions to get the air to kind of expand the rib cage front to back, and like even like laying on a like a yoga block or even like a towel, because sometimes at first like a yoga block just hurts, like putting that on a sideline position when you're laying on it, that can help force some of the air up and down, side to side in the rib cage to expand it anterior to posterior, and that seems to really help. Another big thing for me that I found is that when my calcium drops too low, my rib cage hurts. It's and which makes sense because calcium is just crucially important for literally everything, but especially muscle contraction. And if you think about with us breathing, like those intercostal muscles are having to move and have calcium oscillations all day, every day, right? And so I found that to be very helpful too. Uh, and then for this joint specifically, um, the biggest thing that I found that helps is just getting it stronger. And so, um, in this case, like even some of the FRC capsular work where they focus on going to active end range and getting those end ranges stronger, and then also avoiding my passive ranges because for all of us that are hypermobile, you know that you can go to passive ranges and just like sit on ligaments and stuff, but that doesn't help anything. So like I can just go down in a squat and just be completely unloaded. I have no muscular tension right now, but that's not a good thing, right? And so this is why like we talk about even with the lifting, so many times when we see people lift, they don't keep the tension in the muscle. They you kind of just like go from end range to end range, and so we just kind of like drop the weights. Like it's not a complete free fall, but it is definitely more of a free fall. And then we kind of just like swing it back up again instead of the entire time keeping the tension in the muscle, low, controlling the weight down and then controlling the weight up to, get the tendons and muscles stronger. It's very hard to get ligaments. However, just doing the motions in general is great for ligaments because they are still getting some blood flow and stuff. So those. And then I also just want to say too, like I used to dislocate and sublux my left shoulder like all the time. Like it was my weak point. It was like whenever I was stressed or like whenever anything was going on, it would dislocate. And continuing to get out of the LEA was like a big, big thing that helped fix that. And so, I do think that's important as well. Some people find some of the different like collagens to be helpful. Each like collagen type kind of does a slightly different thing in the body. There's a lot of debate about like, you know, is the collagen actually being digested and uptaked as is? Most of the proteins that we digest, they get chopped up into single peptides, dipeptides, or tripeptides. However, I do think that there's like signaling that does come through, signaling molecules and stuff that comes through that is helpful. So if you do well with some of the different I don't do well with collagen and gelatin, so that's why I don't personally use it. But if you do well with it, that can be helpful. Red light, especially sunlight, can be incredibly helpful. People find like, especially after acute things, high intensity PEMF can be helpful as well. But yeah, over time, I've just found, especially, like I said, especially calcium, especially the LEA, getting rib cage mobility, which can be really difficult, and then, you know, strengthening the specific joints at our active ranges and not pushing them to the passive range. I found those things to be the most helpful. So, okay, awesome. I think Jericho is next, uh, right after Brittany. So, Jerica.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, I listened to the Q&A replay from you and Tyler just the other day,
Oh, on
and
Wednesday.
yeah, and I think that I'm gonna forgo the cut.
Okay.
I think I fall into that category that you said, I don't know. I'm actually just so pleased with the results that I've seen. Like I truly can't believe like the results that I've seen just from like increasing calories and like, I lifted regularly before, but I definitely wasn't like focusing on progressive overload, whatever. But
Yeah.
so with that, like I'll just keep we'll just keep adding, right? Like so this whole time I'm just gonna like keep adding and hopefully see some more changes, like body recomp, right? So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we so there's going to be every single cohort, there's always going to be some amount of ladies that, because we have a lot of ladies that choose to continue on from previous cohorts, and a lot of them they just like want to keep building and stuff and want to focus on the recomp. And like I said in the call, obviously, depending upon current body fat percentage, current height, but if you have, anywhere from only 5 to 15 pounds that you want to lose, 5 pounds would be closer for your like for like me, like 5 feet tall. 15 pounds would be closer to if you're like 5'8", for example. Um, at that point, I would really encourage, especially if you're finally feeling good of eating more food, finally seeing muscle mass show up. Yeah, Liz, sorry, Derica's like, yeah, definitely. Then uh I would really encourage to just continue building and the slow recomp. And so people look at recomp and kind of and like maintenance in general in kind of two ways. The standard one is the recomp one, and so that's just the slow removal of fat mass and then about equal addition of muscle mass. And so that would be how a lot of people look at recomp. And so over time, your body fat percentage would be going down because you'll be losing fat mass and gaining muscle mass. There's another way to look at maintenance though, and that's that your body fat percentage stays the same, but you're adding muscle on top of that. So the actual fat mass on your body stays the same, but you're adding muscle on top. So you would see this scale very slowly tick up. And this I would consider to be more of like a slow build, honestly. That's kind of what we do in the build program, um, which is open to anyone who's done at least one round of transform. Um, but it's just a very small caloric surplus, so that, like I said, you keep your body fat mass on your body the same, but you're putting on muscle. Well, hopefully most of the weight that's coming on is muscle because you're just in such a small surplus, like maybe 100 calories or so. It depends on the person. Um, and then you're putting on muscle over time. But yeah, I am hugely all for that, especially if you're in, in that range. There's some nuance about like body fat percentage. Like, I would say for sure, if you're 30% or below, this is a great space for that range. And especially just because putting on muscle takes so much time. And, you know, a focus on that I think is important. Like if anything, I continue to see that when people really focus on maintenance for at least 1 year, if not closer to 3 years, they actually start to look the way that they really want to look. Because again, of being in positive nitrogen balance to put on muscle mass, all of that stuff. So with that said, like you have to keep lifting and like doing the things, right? But yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And I think just I'm pretty dead set on it because like the thought of cutting, honestly, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know. Just because
Yeah.
it's been so great
Mhm.
eating, a good amount of food. And but I think like once that time gets closer, I'll send you a message and we can like look at where I'm at. But I think I do fall in that category. I don't think I have more than like 8 pounds to lose. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine being,
Yeah.
so anyway,
Well,
so okay, great.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that when the time gets closer then.
That sounds great. And yeah, we have a couple educational modules. Like I think we have one that's like titled like to cut or not to cut, like a play off of Shakespeare and stuff. And so those are great to listen to. But then especially over the next Q&As like that are coming up in office hours and stuff, like, definitely we can for sure continue to talk about it. And um yeah. Whitney said, can freeing up the rib cage like this help with costochondritis? So yeah, I used to have really bad costochondritis, so much so that like I've had like an ultrasound of my heart and stuff like that because with costochondritis, if it's on the left side, you don't know if it's like a heart issue or if it's just the rib cage issue and stuff. And obviously it's mine was costochondritis, not a heart issue, but um, I have found that, opening up the rib cage, getting mobility in those ribs, getting the ribs to actually be able to internally rotate and externally rotate to be incredibly, incredibly helpful for costochondritis. So, because it can be very debilitating when you get that like sharp pain and stuff, especially if you're like also concerned that, okay, is this my heart or is this, just the ribs and everything? I do, recommend that if you ever are concerned that it could be your heart, please get it checked, right? Like that is due diligence. I know a lot of us don't have the best relationship with conventional medicine, but it is very important to get it checked just to make sure. And then from there, assuming that you're, cleared and stuff, then it is probably costochondritis. And I something that I found very, very helpful. I don't have one with me right now, but you can get these like plyo balls, and you can because usually the costochondritis is coming from the back of the rib cage versus even though the like sharp pain is from the front. But you can get these plyo balls, and you can put them just to the side of the spine, not directly on top of the spine, but just to the side of the spine, and lay on it, and just like breathe into it and stuff. And that seems to really help get some mobility in there and stuff. But yeah, it's hard. And then also just like being aware of like how you're sitting and your posture and stuff. So a lot of us, especially nowadays with phones, where we kind of hinge off of our necks, so we collapse forward and go like this and hinge off of our necks. And so I'm a big fan of global extension. So I'm a big fan of tummy time. Like, we have our babies and stuff as they're starting to learn to crawl and stuff. They do tummy time and they get global extension, and I'm a big fan of global extension for adults as well because a lot of us just do not, get in that position. And you can also like grab onto the bar and, kind of just like bring your feet behind you and kind of stretch out all that front line and stuff, and breathe into that as well. But yeah, Jane, that's what I would do for costochondritis. That's what helped me the most for costochondritis was the plyo balls, and just like at the beginning, it's going to be pretty painful, potentially. Depends on how bad the costochondritis is. And so I would only be down there for like 10 seconds. But eventually I built up to like 3 to 5 minutes at a go. And that was like the big mover for my costochondritis. So Marilyn said, regarding the 45 calories per kilogram body weight or kilogram lean body mass, how to determine which to use, body weight or lean body mass. Yeah, so I honestly more look at this as checkpoints. And so I first want to see people at kilogram of lean body mass. That's like well, really the first checkpoint is like the LEA checkpoint, right? And that's going to be, it depends on the person. It could be anywhere from 20 to 40 calories per kilogram of lean body mass. And that's the LEA checkpoint. So we at least want to get there. And then from there, the next step is, okay, can we get to 43 to 48? So a good number is 45 calories per kilogram of lean body mass. And then if we can get closer to total body mass, with nuance, right? Because the higher body fat percentage, just the more body mass you'll have. And so some people will then use like ideal body mass. I think the difficult thing with ideal body mass, though, is that a lot of us have this number in our head of what we think we should be. And if you run things like your FFMI, your free fat mass index, which Menno Henselman has like a fairly solid calculator, make sure you choose woman or female, I think it says. Um, it will probably show you a number that you didn't expect, right? Like for me to be at my like quote unquote muscular genetic limit, I supposed to be in like the 130s. And that takes a lot of time, right? Because that's a lot of muscle I have to build. And I did lose a lot of muscle from having like repeated rhabdo and stuff, but I'm like slowly building it back up. But I'm still, maybe this year I've been able to put on like 2 pounds. I went from like 111 to 113 at 5 feet tall, and I'm still building, right? I've been in this like kind of swapping back and forth between maintenance and build the last like 15 months now. So it just takes a long time. But the fact of the matter is that the number that we think we should be is probably a lot lower than what, how we actually want to look. Because at the end of the day, most of us want to have the look that has more muscle, that where our bodies have more muscle on it. So that is a big consideration. Okay, let's take Chelsea.
Hey, Kathleen.
Hi.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about lymph stagnation in general. I've heard you kind of briefly discuss this on a few podcasts about lipedema and stuff like that. I'm so curious and fascinated, like why things like get so progressive and so bad so quickly too, sometimes. But anyway, I know we do the big six, but I'm wondering what other practices you do that have really helped you. I'm doing dry brushing and some fascia work, and I have an infrared sauna that I like use. And then obviously muscle building too. But like, yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, lipedema it's a difficult one because it's the lymph becomes involved, but it seems like that the lymph doesn't come involved until later stages, and then you kind of get this combination of lipedema and lymphedema. A lot of people are aware of lymphedema because of like breast cancer, for example, when you remove, when you have like a mastectomy and you remove those lymph nodes and stuff, the sentinel lymph nodes, a lot of women will then get, pretty crazy lymphedema like down their arms and stuff. Um, I'll go back to that in a second. To give you like a practical thing that I like to do, there are some really great YouTube lymphedema, like self massages that you can do. The only thing is that, um, it's like what I was talking about with the plyo balls. They typically recommend don't do the entire thing at first, right? Like just do like the first section and then wait a couple days and then do like the first section and the second section and then wait a couple days and like build up to it. So I've done that. For me, like, it's the morning here. And so like in the morning, it depends like how stressed my system is. Like if I got a poor night's sleep last night and stuff like that, I definitely retain more water, how hydrated I am. Obviously, salt and stuff like that, but not everyone is salt sensitive. The micronutrients, like if I've kind of slipped a little bit on certain ones, especially like a big one for me is calcium. Another big one is B5. Those are like my big ones. But for some people, it could be zinc and B12, right? So it really depends on the person. But yeah, I'm a big fan of those self lymph massages. If you can, afford to actually go see a specialist and have them do a full lymph massage, that can be incredibly helpful. But again, though, and they should know this, but like, um, I would almost start with like the self ones so that your body is used to it. And then if you were to go see a specialist, then they could actually do like a full one on you. Or like maybe the first one would be like a partial, but they would go to a full a little bit more quickly because like they should know the gradual increase to it. The lymph system though as a whole is just very interesting because obviously there's no you know, colloquial pump like we look at the heart. Not that the heart is technically like pumping, but there's nothing there like the heart. And so what we have is walking. And so walking is hugely, hugely important because when we walk, our leg muscles help to drive those gates open with the pressure flow up. Um, and the other thing too is just movement in general, so that when the byproducts of the cell is coming into the extracellular matrix before it's like picked up until the lymph, um, you know, moving and getting blood flow to allow those fluids to just continue moving, I think is just very, very important. So with lymph though, dry brushing I think can be great because really you don't want a ton of pressure. It's not like a deep tissue massage. Like it is pretty light when you're doing it because a lot of the lymph is well, at least the peripheral lymph is more to the surface. For the like deep lymph, I'm a huge, huge fan. Same thing with the rib cage. Like I'm a huge fan of just like breathing, like deep breathing and working on, just being in different positions, like a hook lying position where you're on the ground with your feet on the floor and slowly over time, working to how long without like forcing it because it should kind of come a little bit naturally, but like how long of a breath in can I get? And I getting 360 expansion of my rib cage, not just like my stomach moving up, for example. This is great for pelvic floor and stuff too. So like you're hitting multiple birds with one stone. I don't for Sarah's benefit, I'm not a huge fan of that term, but you understand what I'm saying. Like you get multiple benefits from breathing and like breathing well. But yeah, so working on how much can we expand and then how much air can we get out, but in a non-forceful way. So like some people will go like very hard, and I'm not a huge fan of that, especially if you are compressed A to P. Um, I'm more of a fan of the foggy sigh out, but you keep going until you feel your deep core kick on and stuff like that, and you get all that air out. And then, so you're basically using your breath as a pump for your deep lymph that's like all up underneath your rib cage and all up in here and stuff. Um, so that's another great thing. Yeah, those are the things I would say practically. You know, when it comes back to the theory side, lipedema, we still don't really know. We think that maybe it's related to the PPARs, which is the PPARs is like what controls they have to do with the peroxisomes, and peroxisomes are kind of like mitochondria in a way, not exactly though. They do a lot of great things though, right? Like they are part of the reason why we can myelinate the nerve sheaths and stuff like that because they make things like plasmalogens. We do alpha oxidation in peroxisomes, so they do a lot of stuff, but they also create a lot of like reactive oxygen species and stuff. And so this is why, micronutrients are important because we're able to deal with the ROS. Not that ROS is necessarily bad because it's just signaling, right? But too much is a problem. Um, uh, so yeah, food nutrition is important, but with the PPARs, there's some that that govern fat storage and some that govern fat release. And there seems to be something going on in the lipedema places that's causing signaling issues between these things. Um, if you look at, the Lipedema Society, most of them push a keto diet because of the idea of the peroxisomes. But if anything, I personally, that has not been my experience. If anything, I have found that my lipedema has improved very, very slowly over time by focusing more on high carb but making sure, the reason why they post the keto diet is because not at the beginning, actually, people with lipedema are a little bit more protected from metabolic syndrome and stuff. But towards the end, you do start to see signs of metabolic syndrome happen, like as you get closer to like stage 3, stage 4 and stuff. And so because of this, they're like, the conventional view is, well, if we're seeing metabolic syndrome, reduce carbs. But I hope you all are starting to get to the understanding that that is not actually how we deal with the problem. You're just kind of like kicking the bucket down the road. And eventually the body's gonna like become more and more insulin resistant because um, it's gonna just start making glucose because it's not seeing it, right? And then the signaling is not there and stuff. So um, I don't think that's the way to deal with it. I think you deal with why, where's the metabolic syndrome coming from? Are you iron deficient? Are you B1 deficient? Do you need more chromium? Like, so back to the micronutrients. If you focus on minimally processed whole foods and, you're kind of looking at your chronometer targets and stuff, you should be mostly hitting these things, assuming you're hitting mostly 100% of the other things. And so once you get to the point of like calories are solid, macros are solid, I would really recommend making the shift to, okay, how can we, maximize getting the RDAs from food, not fortified food, to help all of these things. Um, but yeah, so, because for me, I have definitely seen uh, no more um, like
Person.
yeah, progression. And I've seen regression of like I used to have absolutely zero Achilles tendon definition, zero. And now I have some. Now, part of that is also because my peroneals don't like to work because I've rolled my ankles so many times. And so a lot of it is also structural too. But like at least from the lipedema side of things, and like, my like those with lipedema, like you push on your legs and stuff, it hurts, right? Like it really hurts. It's painful. It's like this like fibrous tissue kind of that like it's hard in a way. It's weird, right? It's weird. Um, so that would be my big recommendation but it's just time, right? Because it's just taken a lot of time. And I know that's hard, but at the same time, I think the positive is not progressing to the different stages. And then I do think too, like doing the best you can to build the muscle, so that you're at least getting like blood flow and hopefully like you're getting some myokine signaling. And like my hope is that at the end of the day, all of that positive signaling ends up leading to a positive, right? But yeah, I think the biggest thing is can we stop the progression and then can we get a little bit of regression if possible? So
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
really fast. So like most women will get it in the legs, but eventually it'll come up into the upper arms and stuff right here, which a lot of women already, feel like they don't like their like upper triceps and stuff. There's I think the next one of the next mesos, there's a tricep movement that I have in there, where you're basically like 90-90 position on the wall and you do tricep extensions. And I found that to be incredibly helpful for the proximal tricep, to get that area right there. So um, basically finding movements that, you know, we can't quote unquote spot reduce fat. But I find that if we can get these areas that we want to focus on, if we can get them more muscular, that does have a carryover and a benefit to the fat. So, and
Yeah.
there's a theory that we can spot reduce in very, very small amounts in a calorie deficit. And so this is what um, the build group is about to put to test, and the fall group will be putting this to test when they do their cut. And the winter group is going to be putting it to test as well. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I thank you. That's really helpful. And I actually haven't been like diagnosed with lipedema. I just have noticed a big change in my legs after like yeah, some like life events and different things. And it could just be a like lack of muscle, you know, it could just be like not yeah, like
yeah.
structural problems in general. So we'll see over time what
Yeah,
happens.
so usually with lipedema, you see like excessive bruising, like easy bruising in the areas that have lipedema, and also you tend to like you might feel if you were to like rub your finger, you might feel these like little like nodules as you like rub like tiny nodules as you rub your finger like over the areas, and it typically hurts. Those are like the big telltale signs. A lot of people, it's hard, right? Because a lot of people think that they have something and there's a lot of reasons for why we think that. But really, like you said, it's just we just need more muscle. And I would personally, psycho-emotionally, hold on to I just need more muscle and put your time and effort into that, into thinking, okay, I have to do all these other things. Just because I feel like it is a better way to say I can do something about this versus I can, and that's even how I've approached mine. Like, okay, my legs look like this, like what can I do, right? And it's also hard too because like some of my structure issues and stuff, it has been very difficult sometimes for me to actually like I can get a really great stimulus in my upper body with lifting, and sometimes it's very hard for me to get a really great stimulus in my lower body because of things with my rib cage and my pelvis and all of this stuff. So there is that component of things too, and I would just hold on to that is basically what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Yeah, Whitney said, "Thank you so much. I've been to the ER thinking it was a heart attack before I used the back pod." Yeah, the back pod can be incredibly helpful too for costochondritis. I've definitely used the back pod. I like the back pod. Sometimes I find though that the way that the back pod is shaped, I like the plyo balls a little bit more. So that's why I like both. Um, Lizette, really fast. Hi, at works with limited conversation. My PT says I have an SI joint issue, dull ache of the low back, dimples. What are your general principles for training around this without aggravating it? Also, in your experience, does this type of inflammation tend to respond well to high dose omega-3s, or do you view SI issues as more structural? Um, I'm not a huge fan of high dose omega-3s. I think the, I think you can find the positives um, from other things. And so, because of that, I'm not a huge fan, especially because most of the omega-3s on the market are already rancid. And so I am a fan of having fish and getting some omega-3s and stuff from fish. And so I would definitely do that. SI joint issues, like that always makes me think of like pelvic floor. I'm a huge fan of finding a really solid pelvic floor PT if you can. If not, there are some really great online pelvic floor programs, and so that might be something to consider. Um, but like even with like SI joint issues, if you're here and you can tell me, hi Ruth. Oh yeah, yeah. You're welcome, Ruth. If you can tell me, like when you sit down, do you feel both sit bones underneath you? And if you don't feel both sit bones underneath you, like that right there is like a something to work on and like a telltale sign. So, um,
Yes, I generally do. Sorry,
yeah. Okay.
trying to go into a quiet room.
You're good.
And I thought it was like lower back pain for like the longest time, but it's really, really low. So when he identified it was like that SI location, general location.
Do you have equal internal and external rotation of your hips with your femur?
I'm not sure,
So
but I think so. Yeah.
that might be something to test is you basically put your legs, you lay down, put your legs straight in front of you, you pick up one leg into a 90-90 position, and then you see, how much external rotation do I have? How much internal rotation do I have? How difficult is it? Do I feel any like pinchiness? And then you put that leg down and you repeat on the other leg. And then you compare the two legs. And then you also, especially if it's one-sided SI joint, and then you also pick your legs straight up and compare, before your pelvis rocks, and you compare both legs straight up too. I would consider that. A lot of things too. So like if it's coming from like the sciatic nerve, that can also be because you just need more extension in your low back. And so again, back to like tummy time and stuff like that too, because a lot of us, we're sitting down in this like slunched over posture and stuff like that. And so a lot of it can just be you need more extension. Some of it can be you need to strengthen your hip flexors. That's part of the reason why we have hip flexor strengthening in the training program. So yeah, it really just depends on like where is it coming from, right? Is it coming from an internal external rotation thing? Is it coming from an APT, PPT, so posterior pelvic tilt, anterior pelvic tilt thing? Is it coming from the low back? Is it coming from the QLs? Is it coming from the hip flexors? Yeah, so it's hard. So what I would do though is just like start, basically have a checklist and just start like working your way through the checklist and see like, okay, what can this be? I had big SI joint issues after delivering Henry because he was full term, 8 pounds, 5 ounces, very different from Harrison. And in order to deliver him, my husband, because of my pelvic shape and stuff, thank God I had a really solid um, uh, midwife who didn't rush me to a C-section, but um, my husband had to literally I had to put my pelvis and my femurs, one in internal rotation, one in external rotation. Then my husband had to literally shove my right femur up and away from my head, and then one push like that, and then he shoved it away one more time, one push like that, and he came out. So yeah, it's I understand the frustration when it can come to the pelvis and the SI joint and stuff like that. I found adduction work to be really helpful too. So, in the training, we definitely have some adduction work. You have to be careful because at the beginning, if you do too much, it might irritate it. But the like adduction machine might be helpful. I'm more of a fan of Copenhagen planks. I think in one of the mesos we have a short lever Copenhagen plank. But again, at the beginning start with just like a like 5 second isometric and like very slowly build your way up because it can at the beginning like exacerbate things and stuff. So, but yeah, that's what I found to be most helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate the starting the
Yeah.
checklist and exploring, not just
Yeah.
being ignorant about it. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I love, I know it's frustrating sometimes because it's not like this is it, but it's like, okay, we have a thing of things that we can go through and kind of check out and see. And like maybe, going through this doesn't directly address that thing, but like maybe you've also been having, I don't know, something else, and then you like start going through these things and addresses the other things, and then eventually you address that thing. And so over time it's like a positive thing. So yeah. Just I think like I said, like the important thing is to know that you can positively impact things and just slowly work on it over time. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Anyone really fast, if anyone is here from UK, Europe that has a question, just because they never get to be on live, like Ruth or anyone else, please let me know because I want to make sure I definitely get to your questions. I'm going to try to get to everyone's question, but I really want to make sure I hit your question. If you have one, you don't have to come up one if you don't. Um, but okay. If not, next would be, hold on. Yeah, yeah, UK, Europe. Um, yeah. Okay, next is Heather. We'll do Heather and then I'll go back and do Jess in the chat. Hi, Jess. If you can unmute yourself, Heather. Let's see if I can
Okay.
unmute you.
Can
Okay.
you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, I'm technologically challenged. Okay, so I had sent a message to my coach, but I didn't get a reply for a few days, so I wanted to ask it here. Background: I joined the program because I'm 40. I'm about 20 months postpartum, and I'm finally entering a phase of my life where the weight doesn't come off with calorie restriction. And after a long, probably a long time of calorie restriction, kind of like you describe in your podcast, nothing has moved, like nothing, or very, very slowly. So I joined the program and we finally get our calorie and macro goals. Mine is set. I want to say like 1,000 under where I was shooting to eat. Like it's about 1,800. And as a woman that's my size, my height, plug in the machine, it shoots me out between 2,500 and 3,000 to get not only to meet your daily requirements, but to gain muscle, which tells me why I wasn't gaining muscle going to the gym, eating
Right,
1,200 to 1,500 calories like I had been.
right.
So then what do I do with this information? Because I have no desire to eat 1,800. That'd be a cut for me.
Yeah.
And I was trying to work in the opposite direction, but I want to understand, was it an error or is there a good reason for this that I don't understand?
Was the 1800 in Chronometer or in Everfit?
Everfit, I got the message from my trainer that they had been updated and I looked and
Okay.
that's what I saw. And I asked her, like, do I eat, I have to eat that many or more, or I have to never eat more than that? Like, I didn't
So
understand it and I haven't gotten a reply.
So the beginning part of the program, the first week you guesstimate, the second week you start tracking everything with grams, and based off of those weeks is what they're using. So like basically the average across the day of those weeks is what they're using to input for your calories. So what was your average over those 2 weeks that you ate that you put into the
It,
chronometer?
I can look it up real quick. But it was also all over the place because I was sick. I got whatever flu that everybody else is getting.
That's probably
Um,
why.
okay, and so
So the big thing is that if you were sick and you didn't have like a really solid week of tracking, you don't necessarily need 7 days. Over the what I would do is just over the next 3 days, I wouldn't aim for anything. What we want you to do is track exactly how you normally eat. And it's hard because you're watching yourself now, but I literally want you to track how you typically eat. Don't change anything. And then based off of that, that will be your starting calories. And then from there, they will slowly increase because so I definitely agree that you probably should be closer to at least 2,500. So many of us should be at least closer to 2,500 with nuance, of course. But if you jump there and your metabolism, your needs, etc., hasn't caught up yet, you will go into a surplus, and we don't want to do that. And so we want to step you up there. But the best way to do that is to just figure out like where are you currently at, and then we go from there.
okay, so then if I want to adjust that or address that, I can just go ahead and talk to um,
Yeah, who's your
the
coach?
coach. I have to look that up too. Sorry, my thumbs and my brain can do one thing at a time.
It's
but
okay.
I will look into that and I will do that because like I said, I having been between 12 and 800 for like I don't know a year, I definitely don't want to stay there. So I'll just talk to the coach about that.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is that if you have been eating pretty much every day at 1,200, the hard thing is that, well, yes, your calories should be closer to 2,500. Like I said, if you were to jump
Hmm.
it right now, because your maintenance range has contracted so much that if you were to jump there, you would overshoot your maintenance and go into a surplus.
Yes.
And so, because of that, like, let's see where you're currently at. So again, let's track, everything for 3 days, see where you're currently at. Then we'll set them, and then I keep telling this to everyone. I know sometimes it can be difficult to hit that calorie target and in the macro targets every single day, but I really want to impress upon you all. Please do that. And like if your weight starts to go down, your average weight goes down, message your coach and we will do midweek bumps. I would rather you do that versus staying in this like daily, weekly LEA where we like undereat, overeat, and we're like swinging back and forth and stuff. We want to smooth those things out as much as possible. Everyone here that has been in the program that has been doing that, they'll tell you how just incredibly helpful and important that is. So we want to smooth them out and just keep doing midweek bumps for as many times as we like. We will bump you every single Wednesday, if need be, because your weight is slowly decreasing in order to get you to actually into your maintenance range. But try to hit
Okay.
those targets.
Okay. And then I was going to add, this is one thing I told my trainer too. I'm in a weird spot where I can go down to 1,200 and not lose. I can go up to 3,000 and not gain. I don't know what that says about my metabolism, but I mentioned that. And I don't know, is there a name for that when your body is just like, I'm going to stay right here at this weight,
Yeah.
whether you fast for 2 days, which I have done a few 48-hour fasts,
Yeah.
it loses a few pounds and goes right back up to this 190 number where I'm at
Yeah.
versus I'm going to go out for a Culver's date with my husband and down 1,500 calories for dinner, very abnormal, but I
Yeah.
don't gain anything. Like, is there a phenomenon that has that name?
Yeah, there's like like the thrifty metabolism and stuff like that. But just so you know, you're when you probably go out to eat at like Culver's, etc. We you do see short-term adaptive metabolic, like positive adaptive metabolic transitions that happen. And so even if you do overeat, like the body is able to essentially burn 95% of what you eat. The problem is if you do it consistently, then it's no longer going to be able to do that. And so I really think, and we've had very similar, like many women in the program have had very similar experiences. Like Julie, one of the coaches, like she felt like they're nothing, like she had to go incredibly low calorie in order to lose weight and stuff like that. But um, as you continue to smooth out these things, as your maintenance threshold continues to rise to like this is your actual true maintenance, then from there, when you actually go into a deficit, it actually works. And I know people will continue to be dubious until you just go through it yourself. And so I think that, the best thing that I could say is like just like try to put your all in to the program during the 6 months, the 24 weeks, and um, give the cut a chance. And when people go through the cut, like the way that we cut, it's it's not always for everyone. Some people do eventually decide that no, I do like the long, slow cuts and stuff. I've talked ad nauseum about why I think the kind of get in, get out, slightly more aggressive cut is the way to go versus the longer, slower ones. Um, but some people do decide that, they like the longer, slower ones, and that's what they choose. And at least they had this experience, so they have it in their back pocket if they ever choose to do so again. But yeah, I would just like really show up, put your all into it, and then yeah, have a great cut. And I again, you can talk to multiple people that were very, not sure this was going to work for them. Like Susan in the forum is one of them. Just, Beth, well, Beth did a really awesome job because she decided not to cut the first round and then she cut the second round and like crushed the cut the second round. So because she was building her calories up even higher the first round. So yeah, there's a lot of experiences in there. I know though at the end of the day, like it's not until you go through it, but I really just want to impress upon everyone to again smooth out things as best as possible. Let's get more midweek bumps in there so we can get your calories higher. And yeah, the other big thing too during this phase for the people that are not cutting is to put on muscle because the more muscle you can put on, the more indicative of like the positive metabolic gains you're getting from that. So
Well, perfect. Thank you so much.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay, next I will do Jess. Okay. Hi, Kathleen. I talked with you and Tyler back in September, I believe, about my NC. Okay. You gave me a list of labs I could request, and when I shared that list, he kind of rolled his eyes and said he wasn't ordering any of the tests. Oh my goodness. I asked him why, and he said, there's no reason to if you already have confirmed diagnosis of NCA. Yeah, but it's not being managed. I asked about starting on a low dose of dexamethasone, and he said maybe in the future, but not right now. He prescribed 3 months of birth control pills and said we would reassess after that to see if my symptoms subside. At the same time, he said the pills would only possibly help with my sleep and mood, none of the SI joint, SI pain issues. Burning pain when getting started, slow healing, recovery, etc. Does this seem like just a conservative approach, or is this not helpful? And what are your thoughts on the birth control? That's not fixing anything, but just adding synthetic hormones, right? I'm just not sure and pretty disappointed in this appointment. He said he has treated multiple people with non-classical adrenal hypoplasia, which is why I saw him in the first place. Anything you can say on this would be really helpful. This is like so frustrating. um, okay, so Jess has non-congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which can affect sex steroid hormones and adrenal hormones and all that stuff. Um, so it's frustrating in that he didn't run like your estradiol and progesterone even before giving you birth control because it's like you don't even know like is more estrogen and or synthetic like a progestin depending upon which birth control he gave you gonna like do anything, right? Because like what are your current levels? And so, I personally don't think that's the right route. Um, before going on low dose dexamethasone, I definitely think that you need labs because like you need to know is it coming from, is it an ACTH problem and it's coming from the pituitary? Is it you know, uh, an issue coming from the hypothalamus and ACTH is fine isn't actually an issue coming from the adrenal glands. And so until you do labs, like you just don't know. And so I'm not a big fan of just giving medicine just to, or in this case, hormones, just to, kind of placate symptoms, right? Like if for whatever reason the glands are not making the hormones, like of course we try to support them with nutrition, lifestyle, etc. Like even, there's like a research that came out relatively recently that people that have like Addison's, so that in this case low cortisol, um, getting outside in morning sunlight allowed them to like increase their morning cortisol by like 40% or something, which is great, especially for people that have Addison's because it's debilitating when you have insufficient cortisol. It's deadly. Uh, so this was frustrating. Um, I mean, you could tell him I was taking the birth control and it didn't do anything. Can we get some labs now? But that's like frustrating too, that you have to like play that game. I'm always a fan of being like, I want you to document in my chart. Like, I mean, I don't know, this can go either way. And so some people find this is helpful, some people find it's not helpful, but you could say like, I want, please document in my chart that I asked you for these things and you declined them and your reason for declining them. Um, Sometimes that gets people to at least run some like basic labs, especially because a lot of these things were just basic, like estradiol and progesterone and stuff. So the other thing would be to see if you could find a telehealth specialist that works with NCA. Um, but yeah, I wish I had more to say. Are you here right now, Jess?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, Jess. Yeah, I wish I had,
Hi.
yeah, I wish I had more to offer. Um, but I mean, you
Yeah, it
you
was
need to
just
know
such a
this.
strange response.
Yeah.
He said, I do evidence-based medicine."
I
Like
don't see how
based
you can
on
be,
what?
I guess, yeah, how can you be evidence-based if you don't actually have a lab that you're looking at to actually know like what his
Yeah, and I
system.
I asked him, I said, well, how do we know what the levels are? What if they've changed since I had the tests in 2011? And he
Mhm.
said, "Oh, tests are always fluctuating. Your levels are always fluctuating." And I'm thinking, well, then why does anyone ever run tests?
That is true, but of course tests are always fluctuating, but you're looking for big divergences from the mean, right? Like if you wake up and your morning cortisol is like a 2, well, that's a problem, right? And so that's why we have normal ranges and stuff. Um, so yeah. I mean, the birth control might help. I don't know, but at the end of the day, like birth control has negatives to it, right? And so is the negative worth the potential positive? And that's a hard one to weigh, right? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I know I would almost see if there's like another specialist that you can do like a telehealth appointment so that can actually prescribe and stuff and see if they are willing to order labs for you.
Okay. Yeah, I think I might do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really sorry to hear that. It's incredibly frustrating.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can always like order the labs yourself, like through places like Merrick Health and stuff. The problem is that, say you get labs back and they're clearly indicative of like, okay, yeah, we need to address this. If you were to take it to him, he like I've had this happen where I've had my own labs run. I've taken them to a doctor and they're like, well, who ran this lab? Who ordered this lab? This is not our lab, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how to interpret this lab. And so I'm not going to do anything about it, which, so then at that point, you're just out the like $500 or whatever it costs for all the labs. So yeah, I would try to get them to order it. Okay, Aaron. And with everyone that's on, with at this point how many more questions we have left, I probably won't take new questions. So if we don't get to your question in the call, I'll get to everyone else that has their hand up in the comments in the chat. But if we don't get to your questions, like just please put it in the forum, and I will, do my best to respond in the forum and stuff. So okay, Aaron, go ahead.
Hi, Kathleen. I haven't officially met you yet, so I'm excited
Yeah,
to like have a face-to-face with you.
yeah, I
Um,
know. It's so nice to see you all.
yeah, I'm like, do you even know like who I am? Like, 'cause you're working with so many people, so just hearing my name, Aaron, are you like, oh, this is Aaron?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I am doing the fall check-ins. So I
Okay.
do everyone in fall, and so I definitely know the fall ladies for sure because of
Okay.
the check-ins. But I also, I look at the forum and other things, and we also are there helping with the coaches and stuff. So we definitely know about you all. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So my question, so as you know then is like I started the creatine
Yeah.
and it's now starting to you had asked me like are you actually getting benefits from it? And I'm actually this week really noticing the effects and it's almost like crazy how much more heavy I can lift and because I've started noticing I'm like whoa these feel way too light and
Yeah.
that's so I like bump up and then I was like these even feel too light and so I was bumping up again and I was like it almost feels like a false strength and I'm like can I trust this like what's going on here and I almost was like afraid to go too far because it was like bumping up by 20 pounds almost and I was like this is weird so I didn't know if I should trust that or like because I don't want to cause damage. So that was the first question about creatine, and the second question about creatine is that I feel like my appetite's increasing, and I don't know if that's because I'm lifting heavier. Yeah, just that's like the question, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So to answer your second question, yeah. First, first of all, I'm a huge fan of intuition, and so when I hear things that people say that like confirm my first thought when you first say something, that's probably the right thing. And so yeah, I would imagine that your hunger is increasing because you're just lifting more, and so
Okay.
that's a really good sign, right? Like things that we look for like metabolism, the signs that our metabolism is like picking up again and stuff is a big one is hunger. And so that's huge. So definitely like I said earlier, keep trying to hit the targets even though you're probably feeling more hungry. And then just message me if your average weight starts going down and we'll just keep increasing into the cut. Assuming you choose to do the cut.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing too with hunger is finding when are you hungry and leaving more calories for then. So some
Okay.
people, they're like really hungry in the morning and they need to have breakfast like a king. Some people, they're like, oh my goodness, if I don't leave, 700 calories for dinner and after, I'm going to sleep horribly. And so the important thing is figure out what you objectively do best with,
Hmm.
regardless of well, circadian researcher XYZ said not to eat after 4, and I'm trying to not eat after 4. But the problem is that if I don't eat after 4, I can't sleep, and so my circadian rhythm's being like screwed because I can't sleep, right? Like, we're like, yeah. So, so figure out, what you actually do best. But this is really important for the cut too, because it's really important to know, like, are you someone that needs to bookend calories, so have more in the morning and nighttime, or are you someone that needs to have more calories like throughout the day and stuff,
Hmm.
like satiety reasons and stuff. So, and then, yes, it can definitely take some time for creatine to take hold. Just so everyone knows, though, you know, you do tend to see like a 3 to 5 pound increase when you start taking creatine after like your body is actually, built up its stores and stuff. But just remember, that's not fat mass. And so just let your coach know if you start taking creatine because your weight is going to increase. But again, it's not fat mass. And so, there is some amount of like what is on the scale is, an important metric, something that we're tracking, something that you're tracking, but we have to dissociate the idea that like what the scale is showing is not only fat, right? It's also showing water and fecal matter and bone mass and muscle mass, all that stuff. So just so everyone knows there. With the list, you know, I think it was probably a good call to limit it to 20 pounds that week. But I think that you can continue like this next week if you're feeling stronger. I think you can continue. Um, how much do you limit at a time? I mean, I think it depends on like your relative current strength and stuff like that. Um, and then, also making sure that the movement pattern is looking solid, that you're hitting the tempo, that, like I said, you're not like crashing from end range to end range and actually keeping the tension, which you do a great job with, right? And so, I think if you were to go up another 20 pounds this week, I think you'd be more than fine. So,
Yeah, it's just shocking.
yeah.
Like I had no idea that like yeah, that like the level of it's like feels like a extra superpower with the creatine. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah,
So
well, because
yeah,
you have the mental drive and you also have the muscular drive, and so because usually our perception of effort is what stops it. It's like how we fail. It's not because the muscle is actually failing. Like that's why moms can, who've like never trained in their life can go lift the car off the baby, right? It's because
yeah.
there's something about that neural drive. But so that's great. And creatine. Some people are non-responders to creatine. Um, But creatine can be incredibly helpful because it can take off a big load from the methylation system. And so if you have issues with methylation, creatine can be incredibly, incredibly helpful for that. So,
Yeah, I don't think I was anticipating how long it would take to feel the effects of the
yeah.
creatine. But I'm in the fourth week of taking it and I'm just now starting to notice. So, and the second question I have, it might be out of your scope. I'm experiencing night sweats in the 2 days before my period. And I looked up research like that said, it's like a drop in your estrogen and progesterone, I think. Would you like supplement, or is this beyond what you can answer, or do you know how to?
So when we go into our period, your hormones, they crash and they should crash. That's like part of the signal of like, okay, it's time to shed the lining. We're not pregnant, all that stuff. And so I wouldn't necessarily add those hormones back in when your body's purposely trying to crash them,
Okay.
because then like you might just extend your cycle and stuff like that. Um,
Uh-huh.
for the night sweats though, typically people always talk about like estrogen dominance and stuff like that, which, okay, maybe there's some amount of truth to that, but typically I find that the night sweats come with blood sugar dipping all over the place. And so,
Okay.
maybe those nights like before you go to bed, like, consider having like a little bit of a starch with like maybe a little bit of fat and protein.
Okay.
I find people do better with a little bit of starch. That's why I said that specifically. But maybe you actually do better with like orange juice. The only issue with like orange juice is that it can be like a histamine liberator, and then that can like cause negative effects on your sleep. And so, like find the thing that you do best with. I would personally first experiment with like a starch. Um,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
yeah, and then go from there. But yeah, I would try, if it's always those 2 days, the day before, I
It
would
is.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would try like the starch before bed and see if that's enough to kind of keep
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Because it was saying in the research, like something about like if you're eating carbs too late at night, there's like a glucose dump, like, and that's causing night sweats or something. Am I understanding that right?
But so if you have a glucose dump, that should address the hypoglycemia. So I
Okay.
don't think so. You do
Okay.
have at nighttime, so before the cortisol rise that happens in the morning, you have a histamine dump that happens in that like 1 to 3 a.m. time frame.
Okay.
Um, and so it could be like it depends. When are you sweating
That's
typically?
a good question. That's a good thought. Okay. I don't even know because I'm waking up drenched and I'm pissed off. And yeah, I'm just like trying to get back to sleep. So I don't even look at the time, but
It
I'll
might be
I'll keep a
interesting.
track of that.
Yeah, because maybe you just need a little bit of like histamine support too, and so things like cranberry juice and the B vitamins and zinc from food and stuff like that. So
Okay.
again, I'm a huge fan of getting these things from food if possible, especially
Yes.
especially if you look at like a B and it's at like I don't know like 67% of the RDA or something. It's like okay, we definitely want to get that closer to 100% and then see how we feel before I have to start taking like 400 milligrams of XYZ. So.
Right. Okay. I'll
Yeah.
keep an eye out for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also kind of curious now that you're at like saturation with the creatine, if you notice a difference this month with your
Oh,
cycle.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be
Okay.
interesting too.
Okay.
It's good to see you. It's so awesome. Yeah, you're so strong. So I'm glad to see that you're getting even stronger.
Thank
Um,
you.
okay, I will do Victoria next, and then we'll go to Megan, Jane, Jen, and Ruth. Okay. Hi Kathleen. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? I tend to do better with digestion and sleeping if I eat dinner around 3 p.m., then not again till the next day. So I just want to say from the very beginning, if you objectively do well with something, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. If you start to notice you're no longer objectively doing well with it, I would consider these things. Okay. Um, so if you objectively do well with eating, from, I don't know, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., that's great. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. If you have never, the problem is that a lot of people think that they objectively do well with something, but they just don't like, until you feel better, you don't necessarily know that you weren't feeling like good. And so it might be worth experimenting if you haven't experimented with like eating later and see how you do. But some people that's just how they're like set, and that's okay. So, meal timing. I'm hearing about the importance of eating breakfast, especially for women in menopause, as I'm at 51. Do you agree? I'm coming from a fasting keto world of working out fasted, one meal a day. Okay, yeah. So if you're having one meal a day, I would at least try to have 2 meals a day, right? Like but we're taking baby steps here. So if you're OMAD, I would try to go to TMAD and go to 2 meals a day. Um, just because of the way digestion is happening, the transporters are happening. Um, digestion, if you're having like, and also like to just get all that food in, right? Because it can become very difficult to get, I eat like, right now I'm eating 2,850 calories a day. Like for me to eat 2,850 calories in one sitting is a lot. And so, especially as a 5 foot tall person, like already when I eat, my stomach gets big because I eat a lot of food at one time, and then it drops down over time and stuff. But to eat that much in one, and I'm not saying you're eating, 2,850, but like even to eat, 1,500 calories in one setting can be difficult. And if your maintenance is, 2,000, that can just become uncomfortable and stuff. And so I would try to go to 2 meals a day within this like window. And, I would try to, when we talk about meals, like we try to split the macros evenly. And so say, I don't know, say you're at like 100 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbs, and 50 grams of fat, just to make it easy. I would do 50, 100, 25 at both of those meals, and see how you do and stuff. Again, big thing is foods you objectively do well with. When it comes to like hunger signals and stuff, we do find that as metabolism picks back up, people do start to get hungry. And we also typically recommend that, like, if you're not hungry for breakfast, sometimes you just kind of have to force it because a part of your circadian rhythm is being pegged to when you eat. And so your body basically just learns, like, okay, I only eat during, these times a day. And I'm only going to release those signals these times a day when I typically eat. And so sometimes you kind of have to like force it a little bit. Um, so in general, I am a big fan of having breakfast. So if you look at like the National Weight Control Registry and stuff, like the people that maintain their weight, pretty much everyone eats breakfast. And so, I'm a big, big fan of that. And I just continue to find that people just do better when you eat breakfast because, um, if not, you're really calling on your cortisol to like keep things steady until you eat, and adrenaline and other things too. So, which isn't necessarily an issue, but it can become an issue. And so I would, but again, baby steps. And so let's start with, I would really recommend 2 meals a day. Again, splitting calories and macros between those 2 meals. And, hopefully you also find that your hunger starts to pick up and stuff as we continue to increase calories and as you continue to do the training and stuff too. Alcohol, I'm gluten-free, so no beer, mostly wine and the occasional clean margarita, etc. Yeah, with alcohol, like just to be straight up, it is a to the liver, right? And so there is always going to be a negative repercussion to having alcohol. That's not a moral stance on it. It's just the fact of the matter. And so because we know that, we want to support ourselves, right? And so again, like, are we hitting the RDAs of the B vitamins, of zinc, iron, everything? Are we doing our lymph work? Are we getting sunlight? Are we sleeping? And especially with alcohol, like B1 is crucial. So if like you're not getting 100% of the RDA of B1 from food, like we really, really, really want to work on that because you can get Wernicke's encephalitis from a B1 deficiency and alcohol. And it doesn't sound like you're like having a ton and ton of alcohol. Like this is more for like people that are like alcoholics and stuff like that. But subclinical deficiencies over time can become a very negative thing, right? And so, it is something to really, really concern yourself with. But yeah, when it comes to alcohol, I think we have a video about this. My typical recommendation with alcohol is like, choose a drink that is kind of more top shelf, maybe a little bit more expensive, one that you really like, and like sip on it throughout the night. And go that route versus having multiple of, maybe not so much of a nice drink and stuff. So obviously, like if the goal is to get drunk, that's a different conversation. But hopefully those are kind of few and far between versus like this kind of just one-off social drinking and stuff. So, protein, eating up to 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. My main goals are body recomp and fat loss goals. Yeah. If your fat loss goal is about 100 pounds, like, again, I'm really not a fan of fasting keto, one meal a day, working out fasted and stuff, especially if you have what you feel like to be 100 pounds to lose. When it comes to eating that much protein, I definitely don't think we need a gram per pound. And if anything, I would want to have those calories go more towards carbs to like support your training and stuff. That's why we use the 1.6 grams per kilogram, because research continues to show that like 1.2 to 1.6 is like more than sufficient, which I know is difficult when we have so many influencers, talking about 1 gram per pound or even higher. I think a lot of that is just a carryover from the bodybuilding days, but you know, um, people like Dr. Alan Aragon and like all the other actual like researchers in the field continue to talk about how 1.2 to 1.6 grams, and that's what we find in Transform too, is more than sufficient. So especially to build muscle, because if you think about it, like you're putting on such little amount of muscle, like we're talking about like 2 grams a day, that like you really don't need, we need protein for other things like neurotransmitters and enzymes and stuff like that. And so it's not only about muscle, but we definitely don't need that much muscle. So, and then also like the more protein you have, the more you do start to have to become a little bit more, not concerned, but like just aware of the urea cycle and ammonia production and supporting, that cycle with micronutrients and stuff like that. So, making sure hitting biotin and zinc and B3 and everything. So, um, and also like, and when I say carbs, like I mean like, you know, potatoes and, bread sometimes and stuff like that too, but carbs that have like a lot of micronutrients in it, because like even just, if you look at most of America, like 95% of Americans are deficient in potassium. And so we you can't really get potassium from meat. And so we get it from basically from carbohydrates. So that's another reason why. And potassium is crucially important, especially if anyone has like metabolic syndrome and stuff. So yeah. Okay. Megan, thank you for your patience. Here, I'll ask you to unmute. Can you unmute now?
Did
Okay,
I?
there you
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. I was also wondering if I was too far away from the phone, so we're good to go then.
Yeah.
I have a ton of questions, and I'm not sure which ones fit good for this setting, so I'll just start and you can veto and we'll go from there if that works for you.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and if any of them I feel like I can't answer, I'll just have you put them in the forum, or yeah, I'll let you know.
Perfect. So I guess for the first one, I'll just kind of play off of one of the things that Erin was talking about because I forgot that I wanted to pick your brain about it. I think based off of watching my own trends the last couple years, I think that I have a histamine problem, and I think I've had it for a very long time. So I was curious if you had any input. Sometimes I will wake up in the middle of the night and I don't have the night sweats, but I flush really bad in my face, and as I said, I've done that for ever since I was little. I think more recently, at times it can be like an embarrassment or an emotional thing, but
Yeah,
obviously if I'm waking up in the middle of the night, that's not the case. So I
yeah.
didn't know if you had any input about that at all. I haven't tracked it well enough to know where I'm at in my cycle when I'm usually doing that. But anyway, so that was question number one.
Yeah, so I think first of all, like trying to find trends and stuff can be really helpful. And like for example, if it's a histamine issue, if you have like a high histamine food or like a histamine liberator food, do you get the same symptom? Or do you get like any histamine symptoms?
It is honestly so hard to tell because there are so many things that I have been told at one time or another that I shouldn't be eating. And I think you kind of expressed this at one point. It's like when you start taking away so many foods, it's like, okay, well, what do I eat? And
Yeah,
so I usually just get fed up and I integrate it back in. And honestly, I haven't noticed a difference in like in the flushing and the redness in my face specifically.
yeah.
Um, so it's kind of the battle of am I not paying attention or is it not actually making a difference?
Yeah. Yeah. So really fast at night, even though you're sleeping, it depends. Like if you're in REM sleep, you could be having an emotional response to whatever you're dreaming.
Dreaming.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that is a
Mm.
very big possibility. So I am kind of curious what time it's happening. If you can pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And then like of course, does it seem to wax and wane with your cycle? I think that's really important to know as well. I will say a lot of people have been blaming histamine for a lot of things, but it could be salicylates, it could be histamine, it could be glutamates, especially when you're sleeping, it could definitely be glutamates because of,
Yeah.
the excitotoxicity of glutamate, versus like glycine and allopregnanolone and GABA and stuff like that when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
Um, so I wouldn't necessarily like hang on to the idea that it is histamine potentially
Okay.
because of that. Especially if you've had, like you said, a lot of people tell you, it's XYZ or whatever. I mean, it could be many things. It's just histamine has been like the trending topic over the last
Hmm.
couple of years, right? Um, if it is histamine, like helping yourself with methylation can be incredibly helpful. So if you've never tried creatine, it might be worth considering. If your B2, B6, B9, and B12 are not at 100%, on chronometer, using the NCCDB and all that stuff, it would work to get there. But at the end of the day, like every micro needs every micro. And so once you get
Yeah.
that, you then want to address the other ones, but those would be like the first four. Um,
What were they?
B2, B6, B9, and B12.
Okay.
And then creatine can help because it takes load off the methylation system. Making sure you're getting enough choline because methylation also goes to making, a lot of phosphatidylcholine in the body. Um, let me think. That would be like that, when it comes, the reason why I ask about like, do you get symptoms from eating is because when you're eating, DAO is what handles more of the histamine in the GI. And so,
Hmm.
but with histamine in the GI, like you want histamine in the GI because part of the stomach acid signal is histamine. And so you
Yeah.
don't want to like completely bring that down because then you're not going to produce enough stomach acid, which means that you're not going to digest your food very well, which means that you're going to end up in this like negative cycle when it comes to the micronutrients and stuff too. Um, I'm really not a fan of like if we can avoid that as much as possible, I would want to avoid that and focus on the other things. Um, but again, it might not be histamine either, right? It could be glutamate, and in that case, you would, want to look more at like B2 and B6 to help convert glutamate, for example. Like, a good way to tell, like, is it potentially glutamate is like, do you have issues with gelatin and glycine and collagen, for example?
I seem to do well with them.
Okay, so that's good. So it might not be glutamate then. I mean, but it could be. I don't know, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. It's because like maybe you do well with them, but then your body's interconverting the glycine to glutamate. I mean, I don't know.
Mm.
Um, so yeah. So basically what I want you to focus on over the next like couple of weeks until my next office hours is try to get a better idea of your patterns
Yeah.
and when things are showing up and stuff. And if it is more of the like psycho-emotional side, like potentially that's not my forte for sure. People do well with things like Journal Speak and things like the Curable app, which is for like chronic pain, but it applies to,
Yeah.
all of these things. There's like Dr. Irene Lyon's course that a lot of people like. But it really depends on the person. Like some people, if you tell them to meditate, they get way worse. Some people do incredibly well with meditation, right? And so I wish I could say like this is the thing for you, but like
Yeah.
breathing can really help. But also some people get like very neurotic when they take like conscious control of their breathing, so it might not help you. Like it might stress you out even more. So I wish that there was like one thing that I could say like, okay, do this, and it's gonna like help if it's more coming from that side. But I very much understand because like there are certain topics that like I get like very flustered about, and you'll start to see it rise
Yeah.
in me. My experience at like the hospital, for example, has it causes that. So I understand. But I think that's also a very normal response, and I don't think like you know I don't think that that's bad, right? Because it's your body telling you that like there's something about this situation that is not right, and it's like I'm giving you the strong signal that it's
Yeah.
like not right and stuff. So if possible, like whatever is causing that, like addressing those things too. Obviously, not always the easiest to do, but yeah. Okay. So that was histamine. What's the next one?
So the only real, because part of that question honestly was there's a lot of curiosity,
Yeah.
and I want to go back and rewatch the one of the educational modules that you guys posted when you were kind of breaking down, okay, if you're having this problem, it could be glutamate. If you're having this problem, it could be histamine. It could. So I'll go back and rewatch that because there was one that I was like, oh, that makes sense. I need to look at that.
Yeah.
But do you have, does it change anything? Because there are times when and it's usually hour, half hour after food, and it's usually in a social setting, not always though. And sometimes it's very clear to me, it's like, oh, well, I just waited too long to eat. But sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what just happened. So I will flush really bad. All of the heat in my body feels like it collects in my face and in my ears, and my fingers will like almost like a Raynaud's type symptom. Like my fingers and toes will get super cold.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And
it's weird.
and in the social situation, there's nothing that nothing that like someone always says or something that like potentially triggers it from more psycho-emotional side of things.
Not that I can like think of. Maybe I just notice it more when I'm in the social setting,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Because then you're like, oh, well, my face is really red. Oh, well, I'm really hot. Oh, well, this is weird.
Do you get like digestive responses? Like, do you feel like you have to rush to the bathroom? Do you feel like your stomach is like gurgling? Anything there?
Mm-mm.
No. Aaron said that facial flushing happens to me too, Megan. It burns, super uncomfortable to experience it and frustrating to not find the pattern. Mine is definitely an emotional response. Yeah, the reason so like typically if you're responding to something from food, you typically will see a digestive change. Like if you
Okay.
like for example, if someone is like really sensitive to the glutamate and within like 15 minutes they're like rushing to the bathroom because they're having like diarrhea and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I ask about that. And I do wonder, like, with Aaron, like, I wonder if it is coming more from an emotional thing. Not
Okay.
saying that it couldn't be tied to food and like maybe there is something that you're slightly sensitive to in the food and then it's just like pushing your bucket over, basically. And so
Yeah.
that's why you always tie it back to like about an hour after eating. That's very possible, right? Like, because we have limits of what we can deal with. And so maybe the combination of the two is
Yeah.
what's causing the problem. Um, but but yeah, I think if we can find a little bit more patterns about like, what if it is coming from a food, what potentially is causing it. And then again, back to like, okay, how do you support yourself? You support
Yeah.
yourself by, sufficient protein so that you're making the enzymes, so you have amino acids to make the enzymes to actually deal with the histamine or, the prostaglandins or like whatever is causing the
Mhm.
leukotrienes, like whatever is actually causing it. And then the micronutrients so that the enzymes can actually work. So,
Okay. So I've noticed that, and I don't know if this makes a difference for you. I haven't, um, it hasn't been a trend that I noticed today, but I just got on and looked on my chronometer from yesterday, and my B12 is always very, very high.
are
And
you
then
are you eating food that's fortified with B12
not regularly.
or a drink that's fortified with B12?
No, when I get in and look, it always, one of the first things that it brings up as like the foods that my B12 is coming from is just like meat, ground
Ye-
meat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be from too high. I don't see that from like too high B12. And so
Okay.
I wouldn't and
Great.
because like B12 is saturation dependent because like you have to have intrinsic factor, so you have to have sufficient stomach acid for
Okay.
B12 to actually be absorbed. Before we go to your next question, just because it's really late where Ruth is, I'm going to take Ruth's question and then we'll come back, okay?
Sounds
Okay,
good.
Ruth, go ahead. So I know you can get some sleep. Oh, you're not, here, I'll ask you to unmute. I can't hear you. You have to
Oh,
unmute your, there you
hi.
go. Hi,
Can you
yes.
hear me? Oh, hi. Sorry, I can't. It's nice to see you, Kathleen,
Good to
and
see
the
you
rest
too.
of you too. Yeah. Well, my question was yeah, simple concerning the lifting, like how to measure well or how to write down well what how much you're lifting. For example, in the exercises where you use two dumbbells,
Yes.
do you have to, for example, do you have to in the weight, you have to put, imagine each one is 3 kilograms. Do I have to write I am lifting 6 or I am lifting 3, yeah,
Yeah.
kilograms?
The most important thing is that you know what you mean. And so for me, when it comes to dumbbells, I like to put three because then I know next time, especially when I start to use like fractional plates, because I'll use a plate that's like 0.25 pounds, which is
Mm-hmm.
like zero point 0.1 kilograms basically. And so I put that in there so I know, okay, the next time if I'm going to add another fractional plate, I just need to add like, 3.5. So just one more 0.25 on it so that it's easier for me to remember like what I did and how I like split the weight basically. So I would personally put the single dumbbell weight versus both
Okay, the single
together.
one. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I never knew what to put, and then I had another question, but I can't find it now. Uh, but it's been interesting to listen about the questions from Erin and well, and the other
Megan.
girl who said, yeah, about Megan, about the histamine, because I think many of us deal with like similar issues, and but it's when good listening to their questions and their yeah, experience with that. So well, that was my main question about the how to write down the weight.
That sounds good. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people deal with, I used to like when I would eat histamine containing foods, I used to get like my mouth would be burning. Very much more like colloquial histamine, like allergy type symptoms. I would get like a rash, all that stuff. So
Hmm.
the positive is that it is definitely able to be overcome. It just takes a little bit of time to like build up those stores and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And well, one more thing, really, really fast. When they were talking about hunger, well, or feeling hungry, I completely lost my hunger, like desire, like when you feel like, I'm gonna eat this. But
yeah.
I do have hunger signals, lots of hunger signals. I suppose that maybe in the future will be recovered. Uh, I don't care too much about that, but of course it feels better when you do have the hunger, the true hunger, not just the symptoms or weird feelings that make that you have to eat, right?
Right.
But I suppose that comes about because, of course, I did have it in the past, but I lost it. So, well, I suppose that just will just take time, probably. Mhm.
Yeah, I really pushing the lifting, I find really helps people recover their hunger signals. And then
Really
again,
cool.
yeah, and then again, also like sometimes we kind of have to, you know, eat the breakfast and stuff, even if we're not necessarily hungry, because over time that starts to pick things up.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I do it, and I do it, and that's been very, very helpful. But I was just wondering, and well, thank you very much, and it was great seeing you all.
Okay. Jane and Jen, are you in the UK time or Britain? Jane, I think you are in UK, right? If you're there. Yes. Do you want to ask your question so that so you can get to sleep? Let me see if I can ask you to unmute.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Hi. I'm still bundled up. I was on a walk earlier and then I came in and I've just been enjoying all of it and I haven't even anyway. So I'm all bundled up. But yeah, so my question, I had two questions. I was just trying to remember what the second one was. Um,
Oh yeah,
but
please
the
write down your questions if you're apt to forget them with my
yeah.
coffee.
No, it's good. I was, to be honest, right, and during the last one, I started to write down like, yeah, I started to write down at least my first one so that I wouldn't forget. Um, but I was just gonna ask. I know I put a little bit in the forum, but I figured this is probably a better setting to ask about it. But like, um, I mean, if you remember, like, I know I'm always asking about like CFS and me stuff, this Namia, like all of that, and I just kind of wondering a little bit about what, I mean, obviously LEA, but like what causes in general like autonomic nervous system dysfunction and like those type of issues. Because when I actually look back, I can trace so much back to my childhood and like I always seemed to have issues in this way. I just didn't realize like I have very low resilience and stress tolerance as a kid. And like it wasn't, it's gotten worse like in adulthood, it's more noticeable, but so I'm like, is there anything that could have been, I don't know, like what any kind of link or of something to work on? I also am like, no, we've talked about testing before and I want to actually get some tests done. But anyway,
Yeah,
before I
the
keep rambling.
so I definitely think I look at a lot of things like as a pie, right? And so you have the biomechanics movement side of things, which can cause dysautonomia, right? Like if you're impinging on certain nerves in the cervical spine and stuff like that, that can cause POTS and a whole host of downstream symptoms. This is why, like, in the programming, we try to make sure we always have, some lateral flexion and some flexion extension and, all of that stuff, because being able to segmentally move the spine can be incredibly helpful. Like even if you're having, like a um, like bladder issues and ovary issues and all of that stuff, like that can be coming from the like lumbar spine, for example, and
Wow.
I think into like the upper sacrum and stuff. So you have that side. And it's very possible it could be from the movement side. You have the psychoemotional side, and so this is where like adverse early childhood experiences come in, and also, things that cause like PTSD and stuff like that come in and stuff. And also, even things that might not necessarily be that to that level, but like they stack up over time, right?
Hmm.
And it's like this like you can't do anything about it type thing. And so it just like kind of stacks up over time. There's that. Then there's of course the biochemistry side, so the food and micronutrients and all that stuff side, supplements. And then there's like more the biophysical side, so like light and you know, um, where you are even like on the surface of the earth and the like magnetic field of like where you are and stuff like that. So um yeah, I think every answer has some component of these things, and it's kind of
Hmm.
finding like what slice is the biggest mover for you. And so
Hmm.
um if you intuitively think it's coming from more of a psycho-emotional side, I would definitely go down that path. If you were in a car accident as a child and you're like, oh, actually, I do remember I was in a car accident as a child, maybe it's coming from the spine, right? And going down that path. Um, if potentially someone had like an eating disorder, it could be coming from the biochemistry side of things, right? Just not sufficiently eating enough and stuff. If you didn't have an eating disorder, but like maybe you had like a lot of ultra processed foods, not a lot of whole foods, minimally processed foods. It could still be coming from the food side because of the micronutrients and everything. So it always depends on like where. Gail said that I remember Jane talking about her mother during pregnancy with her.
Mm,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, my mom had good memory. Wow. I love this community. Um, uh, I was going to be too premature, and she said they put her on an adrenaline drip. I remember you said that that didn't seem likely that that was specifically what it
It was probably magnesium that they put her on, mag sulfate.
maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
And they like it, I think it caused issues with her adrenaline. Maybe that's what she's remembering.
Yeah.
But she ended up like going unconscious for like a week. She's in the hospital. And then I don't know if me I don't know, me being in the womb still, I could have got, I'm not exactly sure, but maybe if that played a role. She ended up having a ton of adrenal issues like right after that. So after I was born, she had like, and she still kind of has since then.
Yeah,
Um,
mag sulfate is a lot of people like always talk about magnesium, but first of all, you have all that sulfate coming in, and your body has to deal with all the sulfur. But second of all, magnesium is really hard. So I was on mag sulfate when I went into preterm labor with Harrison, and you're like a shell of yourself. Like I don't remember big parts of it because you're like, it's like, you know, how people have brain fog and stuff like that. It's like the dimmer switch is turned literally all the way down and you like feel horrible. But you're in the situation, you're like, we have to keep baby in for as long as possible. I'm going to do whatever to keep baby in for as long as possible. Like, let's go. Um, when I came off of mag sulfate, every single time I tried to fall asleep, I would desat. My oxygen saturation would drop too low, and I would immediately wake up. Well, I would wake up because I was like gasping for air and stuff like that, but also their alarms were going off because my oxygen saturation was dropping too low. So it definitely has an impact on the body, and it is very possible that it could potentially have impacted you. That's like even talking to Jess with like non-classical adrenal hypoplasia and things like that. You know, that can also have like big impacts on biochemistry, the adrenal glands, like all of that stuff too. And a lot of people have, you know, congenital adrenal hypoplasia and stuff like that. A lot of people like they're told that they have PCOS, but they really probably have closer to like CA versus like PCOS and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, it's hard because because it could be coming from any of those slices of the pie, and so it comes down to potentially trying to figure out what slice it's coming from. And maybe you never figure out the actual cause, but you figure out, okay, when I focus more on this slice of the pie, I get better. And so it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter what the cause is, but I'm taking small steps forward and stuff. And at the end of the day, like I said with CFSME, like all we have is pacing. That's it. And really, all of us, all we have is pacing. But in the case of CFSME, you just have to be even more on top of pacing. And
Hmm.
it's hard, right? Because, like, you know, it took me like 7 years to get out of that. And it's hard, right? Because, like, you feel like, why can't I do this? I am a 20-year-old person. Like, why can I not do this? But now, as, a 34-year-old person, like, I feel night and day better than when I was as a 20-year-old. And so, you do have to grieve a part of that. Like, okay, you did lose a part of that of your life and stuff and who you were then and everything, but um, to then make space for, who you're becoming and stuff. So, but it is hard because it's like, can I just get there? But your body's like, no, we can't. We just got to keep taking these very, very tiny small steps and eventually we'll get there. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Thank you. That's really encouraging. And it's a good reminder that like um the yeah, I mean obviously that's what we're doing in Transform, right? All the environmental or lifestyle people, like everything we can control. And that's obviously always the route I'm gonna want to take is being like, this is something that like what can I do? What can I
Yeah.
do to fix it? And probably more inflicted by yeah, maybe past lifestyle things. And I mean maybe there's some not intrinsic, but like internal things that cause, but like in general,
Yeah,
um,
because like so obviously, like I said, the psycho-emotional side is not my strong suit. I know the things that like work for me on that side, but not for everyone. And it's hard because some people, if they keep going back there, they keep like re-traumatizing themselves and it makes them worse. For some people though, they have to go back there in order to find freedom and stuff. And so, it's again, I know I always say it, but it's again finding that thing that objectively works the best for you and continuing with it regardless of if someone says you're wrong, right?
hmm,
Because, well, yes, research is there, but research is the average and it's a normal curve. And, you know, there's an infinite amount of things out there. And yes, like some of them have way more power than other things. And so, like, sunlight, for example, is like one of those big rocks, right? Where, like, I don't know, something else is a much smaller rock, but like if you have a bunch of infinite curves and you like say you're an outlier on like seven of them, but you like stack them all up and that's what makes you unique. And so it's again like, okay, we start with what does general say, and then from there we start to modify and find things for you. Julie said Journal Speak changed my life. Yeah, I'm a huge fan personally of Journal Speak. I love, especially if I can do the one where I can light it on fire afterwards, especially if it was like a particularly spicy Journal Speak. Yeah, Julie said yes, yeah. If I can light it on
Mhm.
fire afterwards, obviously in a safe manner and stuff. And obviously California is like, why are you lighting things on fire? But if I can do that, it is incredible. It is so, so helpful. But other people like again, other people by doing that, it like re-traumatizes them and it's not a helpful thing for them and stuff like that. And so, um, finding that thing. Yeah.
That's so helpful. Honestly, so encouraging.
Yeah.
And it's good to talk about because it also helps you zoom out and be like, okay, yeah, like just remembering all the, like you said, the pieces of the pie. And also I found that really interesting and even kind of segues that reminded me. I think that's what my other question
Mom,
was.
I
So
connected to
now,
you.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Um, uh, yeah, so natural segue into the other question, but I find that interesting. I didn't fully realize that about the spine and how that can play into the dishon or into like the ANS.
Yeah.
I I like noticed well it's actually yesterday I had like I've never had like apart from my little injury last round I never had any like shoulder issues
Yeah.
and yesterday like my whole like left shoulder basically froze up. I like couldn't lift it in any direction. I could barely lift even like my like forearm up to like blow my nose. And it also made me realize how like any kind of structural physical issues that I've gotten has always been like the left side. And it started
Yeah.
like as a kid, I would get and I still do, but now it's worse. But as a kid, I would get so much pain in my left trap, like going into the neck here.
Yeah.
And I also would get like what I think was, well, and again, still do what I think is sciatic pain, or I would get like on the left side, like pain and even sometimes like tingling, like almost like it tickles. IT band is always really tight on the left side. Um, yeah. Anyway, where was I going with that?
Well, so I'll just get some thoughts. So like, are you
Mhm.
right-handed?
I am right-handed.
Yeah, so like when we're dominant right hands, a lot of us will like twist because of that. And so that could be
Mm,
causing things. It can be helpful to find like the hard thing is you have to like find a knowledgeable like DPT or chiropractor that knows about these things, but like you can have them like obviously carefully and gently like go down and like press on the facet joints and stuff like that and see like is there one that like is painful? And if there's one that's painful, like okay, can you actually like get segmental movement in there and stuff? And like especially if
mm,
it's going into your arm, like kind of the like cervical spine right there is like governing the arm and stuff. Um and so, just doing that, or you could just, move by yourself. That's why like in the program I know a lot of people at the beginning are kind of really nervous to train their neck and stuff, and that's why we have the progression and we want you to start with like the isometrics and stuff. But because so many people don't train their necks, and then it causes big issues with the cervical spine and stuff like that. And then also just like all the forward head posture, and then also in an LEA state, you get scoliosis, but it's basically this like rounding of the spine and stuff like that.
mm,
Um, and for me, I definitely got that, and dealing with the structure is a very, very difficult thing because just because you deal with the LEA, the structure improves, but you've been like this for so many years that like it takes a long time to actually get things back and stuff. So that's what I'm working on now is like my structure because that's where I have the most runway to get and stuff. Um, so yeah, so you can like, you know, very carefully move. And when we're moving, we want to look for segmental motion. So you don't want to be like a greater than less than sign that has like a kink. You want to be more like a C that has like the full segmental motion and stuff. And like, can you move, your neck and your thoracic and your lumbar, segmentally? And then once you can move it segmentally, can you maybe add a little bit of load to it and stuff like that too? Um, so, if you think maybe there's something there, it might be worth doing that. But, and then also, like I said, finding someone that can like maybe guide you a little bit better. When it comes to chiropractic, I'm just like very cautious about any kind of cervical adjustments personally,
mm,
especially being hypermobile and stuff, especially like, there's always the potential issue of like CCI. and all of that. I've had like issues where my atlas and axis have been out of place, and then I get like trigeminal nerve pain and like all this stuff. Thankfully, like I figured out for me, okay, how do I move them back in, and then the trigeminal nerve pain stops and stuff. Um, but yeah, the spine it does a lot for us. It takes a lot of load for us, and we have to be able to move it so that we're not impinging on things and stuff. So yeah, so sometimes it's not a biochemistry thing. Sometimes it is literally you are just sitting like this all day long and you impinge on something and the organs, etc., are no longer getting like the cleanest signal, and that's the problem why. So
That's yeah, that's so interesting, and that makes sense because I really do forget about the spine entirely.
yeah.
Just
So many
that
of us
makes
do, like we're just like leaned over. We look like a shrimp, but basically that's what I think of. That's what I think of.
Mhm. Maybe that could even play into like I have like I don't know if it's they won't give me any tests, so I have to go back again. But I
Yeah.
don't know if I have like hiatal hernia or something. But it's like left pain, like when I was saying earlier about the costochondritis,
Yeah.
like it's all like that left side again where it's like very intense. Uh
Yeah, like I would be interested to know, like, what is your internal and external rotation on like your left side, both your hip and your shoulder? Like, do you side bend?
yeah,
A lot of us
yes.
side bend, and so our right side is shorter than our left side. A lot of people do that. A lot of us have rotation and stuff. And we are asymmetrical by nature, right? Like we have the heart on most of us have the heart like kind of left shifted. We have the huge liver down here that's like right shifted and stuff like that. And so, the diaphragms are different. Well, the diaphragm, depending on the location, it's different. It's not symmetrical. So there is some amount of asymmetry, and that's a good thing, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. You can even see it in my face, like my face is asymmetric and stuff. You can see the shifts and stuff. But you know, we should be able to move in and out of positions. And if we can't move in and out of positions, that's more the issue. And so how can we, that's why I always, again, with the training, I always try to have like thoracic rotation, lateral flexion, like all of those things so that we're trying to move in and out of these positions and stuff, especially the ones that we're kind of stuck in all day long. And so again, just like when you're watching TV, get on the floor and just like be like a baby, like look around, like try to grab behind you and all of that stuff. So I would give that a try.
Definitely. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Okay,
Thanks.
Megan, I'm gonna have Jen go because she's been waiting patiently, and then we'll come back to you and we'll finish up. Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, I'm in the fall group too, so it's nice to see you, Kathleen.
Thank you too.
And you had mentioned that, okay, so my question is kind of two-part but related that since I was sick a few times this fall, you mentioned that like in my bowel movements, it's been like the other issue I've been dealing with, that bowel movements can affect your cold susceptibility due to endotoxin. Kind of curious about that. But my big question is like, is there any reason that I shouldn't do the cut? Because I really want to, but I'm just kind of wondering about this like back and forth constipation and stuff. Like yeah, diarrhea, constipation, and just like yeah, wondering if there's any reason I shouldn't go ahead or like any tips on that.
So constipation is one that can get worse during the cut. And so if you're already having constipation, it is a consideration. That doesn't necessarily mean don't do the cut, but it does mean if you start to notice your constipation is increasing, you immediately let me know and we have a conversation about it, about do we come out early, basically.
Okay.
That goes for any symptom, right? Any kind of, LEA type symptom. With constipation, I think we've talked about this before, but with constipation, like a lot of people talk about magnesium and stuff, and yes, magnesium is crucially important, but just like magnesium is crucially important, so is calcium. And calcium is a huge one for the gut and for peristalsis and all that stuff. And so, really all of the electrolytes are, but like the kind of order I look at it for the gut would be calcium first, then magnesium, then potassium, then sodium, for the electrolyte specifically. For other signals going on in the gut, like I said, we do need that histamine signal for sufficient stomach acid release, and so we want to make sure our stomach acid is like robust and stuff because that's like kind of the start. Well, really before that, we want to be smelling our food, kind of trying to be present as possible. I know that's really hard, especially working or as a mom, like all of that stuff. But if possible, like try to be present, smell your food, and then chew the living daylights out of your food. Most of us, we scarf down our food. We take like maybe 7 bites or less even. Really try to chew it until it's like the consistency of like mashed potatoes, like 30 bites basically, which takes time and I know might be annoying, but really, really chew it because the more mechanical breakdown that we can get, the less our stomach has to do. Um, and then from there, other than the electrolytes and stuff, things to help with like acetylcholine and serotonin, which are like basically two of the big hormones, neurotransmitters. Sorry, neurotransmitters, not hormones, that are helping with peristalsis. So serotonin would be, basically are we getting enough protein so that we're getting enough tryptophan? I would not recommend supplementing tryptophan, but like, are we just getting enough protein? Which again, if you're hitting your protein target, you should be solid. And then also, B12, B6, B9, B2. So kind of like back to those like methylation type B vitamins. Those are crucially important for serotonin. Um, for acetylcholine, and this is crucially important for all of the autonomic nervous system, but the big three are B1, B5, and zinc. Sorry, B1, B5, and choline. My bad. Zinc is also a important here too, but the big three would be B1, B5, and choline. Um, so are we getting them? And yeah, that's the big thing for signaling wise. Back to what we were just talking about, a lot of people, their issues with their GI is more coming from like you tend to find low spine issues and GI issues go together. And so if that's the case, like maybe it's a movement side of things and it's the nerve side of things, like I was just talking to Jane about, and maybe we actually just need to focus on more segmental motion of the spine and getting movement in there and stuff. That could, people are amazed, but like it really has a big impact. And so that's something to consider. Like a lot of people, they just like don't move their lumbar. Like it just doesn't move. And so, something to consider there. Um, yeah, so like pelvic floor stuff can be helpful. Like for, obviously for women with pelvic floor stuff, we have a little bit more like tells and stuff like that. But like for men, a big sign of like pelvic floor issues is they have issues with like constipation and stuff like that. Um, so something there. The other thing, so I'm a big fan of like deep breathing. Some people do really well with abdominal massage. If you do abdominal massage, it is kind of important to like follow the flow of the abdomen. There are some pretty good like YouTube videos about it if you look it up. Um, and I typically would recommend like doing it on an empty stomach. Um,
Yeah, and I've been trying to have more defined meals, but I'm wondering if that also will help.
Yeah, defined meals
Yeah.
really, really help because of the migrating motor complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if the more that you, and that will really help for the cut too. I know it
Okay.
seems like it wouldn't, like I know it seems like if I graze all day, I will be less hungry, but I promise you the more
Okay.
defined you have for the cut will be really, really helpful. So yeah, so with that said, like I don't necessarily think that you can't do the cut. It's just again one of those things that like, you be honest with yourself and then you be honest with me with the check-ins and stuff. And if it's like, you know, there is some uncomfortability of the cut. There is some like, okay, it is normal to get a little bit more constipated. We'll try a couple things. And if it's like getting debilitating, at that point I would say, okay, it's time to come out. And like it is very important that you're like not hard on yourself because you like sometimes that is important, right? Sometimes it's we push the body, it starts pushing back, and we say, okay, we respect that, and we come out and we can do it again, right? Versus we just keep pushing, and then things just don't go well. So, um, yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
That's helpful.
Yeah, but as we get closer, like, really over this next couple of weeks now, try to focus on those things, like especially the defined meals and all of that stuff. And let's see like how much can we improve it so that we're like a really good baseline. And then from there we can see, any changes basically that come up during the cut. So
Yeah, it's definitely better than it was
yeah,
a month or two ago. So that's good. Yeah.
glad to hear that. Okay, Megan, we will finish off with Megan, and it's been a good discussion.
There
Here,
we go. Okay,
here,
got it. I have to plug the water back into the water filter. 1 second.
no worries.
So I think just for the sake of time and to sum up everything. I'll try to like condense it all into one question because I think it's all going the same direction. Um, so I was wondering about the cut as well, just from a very personal standpoint, because my whole goal in doing Transform was I was wondering if I was struggling with an estrogen dominance problem because of early lifestyle choices, and then if that was causing maybe like a low progesterone type situation. And so that was my goal in doing this whole program and in attempting to lose some weight. I think that because of our culture, my ideal body image has been very impacted negatively. And so I don't think that my rainbows and unicorns body image, like it's not important to me anymore, I guess ultimately.
Yeah.
Um, and especially with now thinking about the possibility of trying to get pregnant at the end of the year, I just don't know, like, is the cut gonna be beneficial? What's the metric for that? What's a good way to weigh that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's hard because I would say it's person specific. I just want to like really emphasize what you said. You know, what we are inundated with social media and stuff and like TV and everything has really skewed people's body image. And I think it
Yeah.
is, obviously you shouldn't compare yourself to the unhealthiness that society has become, right? Because that's not healthy either. But like I really think it is really important and helpful to go outside and be like, okay, I'm looking at the average person on the street and you
Hmm.
realize that like, oh, this is what most of America or, UK, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
I know you're in the States, but like this is just talking to everyone. Um, this is what like average is looking like. And obviously, like, you don't want to be like the negative person, be like, I'm better than average. But at the same time, it's like it kind of gives you this perspective of like what we
Hmm.
see is really not what most people are. And like if you can even look at like the body fat percentage graphs and stuff like that, and you can show that like, oh, if I'm at like 25% body fat, you're like in like the top 10% or something like that
Right.
in the States, right? Like it's crazy.
Right.
Um, so okay, so from a body fat side of things, and oh yeah, Marie Claire, her cat is so cute. It's huge. From like a body fat percentage side of things, like health wise, um, you know, at least below 35% seems to be really important.
Okay.
So if you are 35%, but if you're 35%, that is pretty solid. It does seem like the closer, if we can get to, just below 30%, that
Hmm.
seems to have slightly better benefits. But going too low starts to have negative
Yeah.
ramifications, right? And what is too low, it kind of depends on some women, they will lose their period at 24% body fat. Some
Right.
women, they won't lose until like 18. And so, it kind of depends on the person. Um, so yeah, so I would first say, okay, first checkpoint, like, am I below 35%? Okay, we're good. Next checkpoint, kind of, am I closer to like 30% or maybe a little bit below 30%, like maybe between the 25 to 35 to 30%. Um,
Hmm.
that's probably like a pretty good optimal range for most women is that 25 to 30% range of body fat. Um, and it's hard because, we use the Navy calculator, but and there's error to that. So,
Right.
I like if you're kind of close, like I would say you're probably good. DEXA has a lot of error, and I'm just not a huge fan of like, let's just x-ray ourselves all the time, personally.
No.
Yeah. Um, and obviously like there's a difference between the linear energy transfer of DEXA versus like like an old school x-ray and stuff like that, but still. Um, and the time and all that, the exposure time. But still, I'm not a fan of people like taking them every like 3 months as like progress po pictures. It's like you're better off just taking a progress picture than a DEXA. Um,
Right.
yeah, so from those standpoints, like I think those are considerations, especially because like, yes, too much fat mass can cause excess estrogen, which then can cause downstream issues. Now, if you do think you have estrogen issues, like you do want to look at too, what is the fiber content of your body? Like, have you looked at soluble versus insoluble? Which ones you do objectively well with? Because that's going to help bind up a lot of those things and not just like
Mhm.
have it keep recirculating. You want to make sure that at every meal you have, at least 10 grams of fat at every single meal because you need enough fat in order to have the bio release, in order to have those things like actually leave the body. But then you need the
Yeah.
fiber to come in and actually like bind it up and stuff. Most of the estrogens in the body are glucuronidated, so you need enough glucose in order to glucuronidate them. And so again, back to carbohydrates and stuff like that. Um, your estrogen and your progesterone are low.
No, I was wondering, and this is all just like watching, doing my own research. Um, I have a very, I guess I've been playing around with this stuff for like 12 years now. I got into a lot of the like health and nutrition when I was about 12 years old, and I've been just messing around with it ever since. So I have actually gone through a lot of these things. Like I went through amenorrhea, and I'm not sure if that was an overtraining, undereating situation. I also had heavy metal poisoning at the time. So I mean, like there's just a whole lot of stuff going on. So I lost my cycle for, I had been cycling for like at least 3 years, and then I lost my cycle for like a year or two. And so I've had it back pretty regularly for at least 5 years now, I think.
Okay.
Um, but I have a lot of brown in my cycle, and so I'm not sure that's my biggest concern because as I said, just according to Dr. Google and stuff like that,
Yeah.
um, low progesterone was something that came up. And so I was just trying, I'm like, well, what else do I do before I go to the next step type of thing. So
Have you had your actual levels tested though?
I have not, and that was another thing that I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, it might be worth, running it during your luteal phase. Usually like day 21 or so is when most people will kind of run it. It kind of depends on the person, but that's probably a solid time. Just to kind of see what they are because there are, in an LEA state, you do still see estrogen dominance, but both of them are low, but estrogen
Yeah.
just happens to be a slightly higher. And so it would be I think it would be good to know, especially if you do want to, try to get pregnant by the end of the year and stuff like that. Just because, when you go into a cut, it is a purposeful LEA and you can see some shifts to the cycle,
Hmm.
but it usually resolves within the next month. But it also, a lot depends on that, like how long have you been out of an LEA for and, all that stuff. So, um,
So I think because I started being very intentional with eating more and I went pendulum swing to the wrong side, but like in
all in.
2020, that's when I started eating like way more.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until like I'm sure I had a little bit, not last summer, but the summer before, because we had a family tragedy and it was just life. But aside from like last September, I've been eating, I would healthfully say between 25 to 3,000 regularly. And so then last September was when I kind of dropped again because life was like, oh my goodness, and everything. So,
Yeah, the hard thing is dropping, like swinging back and forth and stuff,
yeah,
because like even with the guys coming out of the MSC, it took them a solid 7 months of eating like an outlandish amount of food and like sleeping all day and stuff like that to like I don't know, be like 90% kind of recovered and stuff like
yeah,
that. Um, So the consistency piece is the hard thing because not you, but like so many people will say, well, I've been eating this much food and stuff, but they haven't been consistently, right?
sure. Yeah.
And so that is, it could be a potential concern. I think it kind of just goes back to what I was just talking about. Like if you based off of the body fat and stuff like that, and if you think that potentially you're having a little bit of estrogen dominance because of body fat, and that, it would be potentially helpful for fertility because it is helpful for fertility if you have excess body fat to lose some of it, right?
Yeah.
This is what we're seeing with the GLP-1s. Like, there's nothing inherently great signaling wise about the GLP-1s for fertility. It's just that they're allowing women to lose, a little bit of body fat that was impacting their fertility, and now they're able to get pregnant and stuff. I've had many people go through cuts and then get pregnant like right afterwards and stuff. So,
Yeah.
so it really it depends on you and your starting place. And I think, the what you can do is you can start the cut if you start to have any kind of negative responses to it. Again, it's a conversation with between us, and I
Yeah.
will, my big priority for all of you all is to do this in as much of a health promoting safe way as possible, right? And
Hmm.
so if it's like a no, then it's a no, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
So, and in that case, like we have to make the mental transition from, okay, I'm cutting to my focus is on how can I put on muscle mass and positively affect my body composition that way, and just doing, a slow recomp and stuff, which is great, right? Like and like some people, they do need to lose a little bit of excess fat mass, but a lot of people, it's more so they just need to play the long, slow game of just losing some fat mass as they're putting on muscle mass slowly and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that was something that I was thinking about. So I've been doing CrossFit training also since I was about 12. So I've lifted pretty heavily all that time. And then there was like uh right after COVID, I think. Again, I think I was doing way too much. I was training uh CrossFit and powerlifting
Yeah.
and not eating enough because woohoo.
Yeah.
Um, but I've hit some pretty awesome PRs in the last year. So I hit my 300-pound back squat last year, and I
Nice.
was at like 185, which is
Nice.
had been my normal for body weight.
Yeah.
And so, and
That's
then
awesome.
I don't remember if I hit 180 or if I hit 185, but anyway, I PR'd my squat clean.
Yeah.
And so that was also very exciting because I've been chasing a body weight squat clean for a while.
Yeah.
But Lord willing, looking at getting married later in the year, um, I will be transitioning out of my what I've known for, the gym setup to more of a home gym setup as well. So I don't know if that changes anything. I guess I'm just like, I want to do what's best for my body and I want to do what's going to be most beneficial for the long haul, I guess, is my current goal.
Well, so if you're in the CrossFit realm, I'm sure you saw Tia Claire Toomey like training all the way up to delivery and stuff like that. So, from that standpoint, like it is very possible ACOG says, auto-regulate and you can continue
Hmm.
doing with what you've been doing.
Yeah.
That's their guidance. So I think that steps during pregnancy are crucially important. I do think pelvic floor becomes even more of a consideration. And so if you have like any kind of concerns over pelvic floor right now and how you're lifting with your pelvic floor and stuff, yeah, I would definitely consider that, especially if you want to have a vaginal birth and stuff, because it does
Yeah.
impact things, especially if you have a hard time relaxing your pelvic floor, because that's,
Yeah.
the pelvic floor muscles, they are the muscles in the body that stretch the most, and they stretch the most during delivery.
Yeah.
And so, if we can't like let them go, that does impact delivery and can cause like an emergency C-section and stuff. Not saying it happens for everyone, of course not. Like, I also just want to say too that like our ancestors have been through some crazy stuff and we're all
Oh yeah.
here, right? And so
Oh yeah.
yeah, women have been doing, like so you can get pregnant and do all these things against like insurmountable odds, right? And
Yeah.
have a perfect pregnancy and delivery and all that stuff. So, I'm definitely not against training during pregnancy. I trained during pregnancy, definitely auto-regulated though, especially like, typically like the first trimester is just really hard and you just
Yeah.
kind of, but then you get into the second trimester and it's like, oh, like this is easy, like we got this. Um, so, I think training is great. I think it also always goes back to your goals because, like, okay, as a power lifter and a CrossFitter, you know that like the goal is just to move the weight, right?
Yeah.
And like, yes, of course you're of course getting stronger and you're of course putting on some muscle as you're just like moving the weight, but there's a difference in just moving the weights and actually keeping the tension in the muscle and hypertrophy training. And so I do think that it can be helpful to make that transition and like maybe you
Yeah.
focus on that for a little bit and focus on just putting on some muscle and the, slow recomp and stuff. And then maybe eventually like after children and stuff, you get back to CrossFit
Yeah.
competitions and stuff. Um, so yeah, hopefully, I work out completely at home. Like every so often we'll go somewhere and I'll go to like one of the military based gyms and stuff like that. But uh for the most part, like all of my training is done at home. And, I love it. Like, yes, like are there maybe some machines that I would love to get? Like I would love to get like a combo hack squat leg press one day, but the problem is that they don't make one that's like, well, I haven't found one that's like short enough for me.
Oh,
That's the problem. So I can't go like low enough because they're all for like 5'2" and above or something like that. And I'm exactly 5 feet tall. Um uh but like I have a high to low cable, I have a power rack, I have bars, I have bumper plates, I have a weights multi-hit machine, like dumbbells, kettlebells, like so you can definitely like get a lot done at home
yeah.
and it's definitely doable. Um so I don't think that there's like you're not gonna like lose your gains or anything like that by being at home. And so I think you're still going to crush it and stuff. Because really at that time it's like you have the mentality already that it's like you could make anything a workout, right? Like I don't know, like you could have the mattress and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna be doing like kind of landmine mattress squats or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and with baby, like I think baby is great because like it allows you to very slowly, or not very slowly, but like slowly get back to speed on things
Hmm.
as your body's like recovering and stuff. And so you like, you can do like a hold on to baby and do like lunges and squats and RDLs
Yeah.
and overhead press and lay on the floor and do chest press. And they love it because they think you're having a game with them, right? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so I think, and the other thing too, the most important thing that I have found for my pelvic floor recovery post delivery is holding my sons up front and like trying not to shift them because then we start to like do weird things like this, but like holding
Yeah.
them up front and actually standing upright and not getting into the sway back mom posture that like so many of us do, where we just like send our hips forward and we're just like leaning back like this and stuff. That's why a lot of moms, well, you can get pelvic floor issues doing that, but that's also why a lot of moms like lose their butt because their butt is just like slammed forward the entire time and stuff. So just like staying upright and it like might feel like you're falling forward, but I promise you you're not. Like you're actually standing upright. And so just like look in the mirror and stuff and you'll convince yourself that like, okay, I'm actually vertical. Um, so I know there's a lot there. With all that to say, like, a cut can be very helpful for fertility
Okay.
if the thing that is impacting fertility is body fat mass. Um, no matter how you lose weight, whether it's the long, slow process or the like kind of more short, aggressive process, it can impact your cycle. Um, how much it's going to impact it, if at all, really depends on how much you're set up before going into the cut. So like really focus on micronutrients. Like that's a big, big thing, especially for pregnancy too. Like huge, huge things. Focus on micronutrients. Focus on energy sufficiency. Um, and then from there, you kind of just take day by day and you see how things are going. And if your body starts to send you like clear signals of like, okay, it's time to come out, then it's time to come out. But that goes for regardless of if you're doing more of a short, slightly more
Right.
intense cut versus a, long-term cut and stuff. So, yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yeah. I was just coming, I'm like, okay, if you were to tell your younger self to do anything differently, that's what I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard because if I were to tell myself to do something differently, I would say prodromal labor is not real labor. Don't go to the hospital. So, because I get really intense prodromal labor, and I think that's probably what caused Harrison to come early, is because I
Mm.
was contracting, went to the hospital, and started all the interventions, and my body does not respond well to medication. Like I'm a complete non-responder to Pitocin, which people find
Oh,
crazy, but
no.
I'm not a non-responder to Pitocin. Um, and uh, And I think the interventions is probably what eventually caused him to come early. And thankfully, he was a grower feeder, and thankfully, I was able to get the, steroid injections and stuff for his lungs and stuff. But when I started contracting with Henry, I was like, okay, let's just wait a couple hours, and then they would stop, right? And
Yeah.
so And so he came to full term and stuff. So yeah, that would be like the big thing that I wish I could tell my younger self. Because everything else I did pretty much the same. You know, I get outside, like what we do in Transform, like I get outside in
Right.
the sunlight, walk a lot. You know, even like something that I love doing is like curb walking when pregnant. Like I feel like it makes my pelvis feel so much better.
Okay.
When you're like, you know, you walk down the street, one foot on the curb, one foot off the curb, just like walking
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that, and then going back the other way. I find that
Okay.
really helpful. Um, Hitting the micronutrients are crucially important during pregnancy, not only for you, but for baby, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially, you know, the big ones like B9 and choline and all that stuff, B12, literally all of them though. So like getting them dialed in, I think is really important. Um, Sleep as much as you can, but I don't know, pregnancy, I almost feel like it like comes in waves of like it's teaching you like, okay, this is how you're gonna survive with like low sleep for some amount
Yeah.
of time. Because like you go through periods where like sleep is just like not there. But I think it's part of again getting you used to things and how things will be and stuff. And then also just like really tapping into your intuition because intuition I think is the most important thing for motherhood. I mean, I think for everything, but especially for motherhood because you will know your baby the best.
Right.
Yeah. And so, um, you know, really working on that, if especially if that's like a hard spot, really working on that now, I think is important. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's nothing like people always ask me like, is there anything that you would do like that's super secret or like super big or anything? And it's like, no, it's like literally, like I said, the consistency of doing these things, showing up daily, um, putting one foot in front of the other and stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks everyone. This has been a marathon discussion. My sons are like, okay, it's time, mom. So I will let you all go. I appreciate your all's time and for listening to me talk and for being great, uh, you know, people with great questions and stuff like that. So, thanks as always, and I will see you next month. Bye, guys.
Thank you.